Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ian Summerell. I've been a gunsmith all my life since I was 15, since I left school. So, I'm not going to say I know it all, but I've had a lot to do with guns over that time. Chris is with the Bristol Muzzleloading Breechloading Gun Club, and he's got a collection that's brilliant. So, Chris is going to be loading and explaining some of the guns, and I'll be doing some of the others as well. And we'll try and take you through the history of sporting shotgun. Now today, people just pick up a shotgun, put a cartridge in, and just use it. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, if anybody is of a nervous disposition, or they've got a dog that is of a nervous disposition, please be a little careful, because there might be a bang. I don't know if you've noticed that, but please beware. Now, it's okay just popping a cartridge in and going bang bang. We take it for granted today. But it had to start from somewhere. There had to be a way of producing what we use today, which is a cartridge. It had to start somewhere, and somebody had to come up and invent it. And once they got the invention, figure out how it was going to be used. Now to start with, we had black powder. Originally from China. The Chinese mainly used it for fireworks and display purposes. The emperors at the time didn't want the people to have firearms because they were worried of having a revolution. So they didn't develop firearms, and they mainly used the black powder for fireworks. We didn't get black powder over here until the mid-1300s, 1345 in Germany, where a monk in Germany played around with saltpeter and charcoal and sulphur and came up with a formula for black powder. We then had to decide how we were going to use it. So originally they just had a metal tube with a hole in the back, and they would fire it off with a hot iron or a match. I don't know if you've seen a matchlock, which is like a slow burning fuse which you would use on fireworks night, which is a piece of string soaked in saltpeter, and it just slowly burns. And they would then touch the match onto the touch hole and it would fire. Okay for military use and scaring people, making big bangs and lots of smoke. Not very effective for shooting birds. They then decided that what they needed was a mechanism, and what they did is on the side of the gun they fitted what's called a matchlock. So the match was then taken from being handheld to being in what was called a serpentine, and that was put on the side of the gun with a very crude trigger mechanism. So when you pulled the trigger, it would push the serpentine down that would put the fire or the match into the flash pan which would fire the gun. Now this was round about 1500 and before. There are reports in Spain that are now coming out in old manuscripts that at the end of the 1500s, 1580, 1590, the Spanish in the southern part of Spain around Gibraltar used matchlocks for shooting flying partridge. Now we know that the Spanish used the spaniel with the birds of prey to hunt the partridge, but it's now coming to the light that they actually used the matchlock as well. But the matchlock wasn't very good because it took a long time to load and it took a long time to fire. You had to wait for the hammer to go down. So what you needed was a better mechanism. So then we come on to the flintlock. Now this is the Rolls Royce of flintlocks. This is Chris's Manton. Now Joe Manton was one of the big gun makers in London. And what you've got is you've got a flint, and when it comes down it's sprung and it hits the frizzen Now this is the same design as they were using to start fires.
It just drops a
You had a flint and an iron. And when the flint hit the iron, it would spark. They then used that spark to put the spark into the flash pan that would then fire the gun. It became a lot quicker. Although this was designed in the 1630s, even during the English Civil War, which was 1640 I should say, they still had flintlocks around, but they were very, very expensive to produce. It was like when the first computers came out. When computers came out, they were very, very expensive and very few people had them. The same is true with the flintlocks. And it wasn't until they became widely used and more people were making them that the price came down, and it then became affordable for the ordinary man. So, you've heard of lock, stock and barrel. That comes from the gun. You've got a man would make the barrels, a man would make the stock, and a man would make the lock. And it wasn't any good until you put lock, stock and barrel together. Now to use it, what we use is black powder from a flask. And this has got a measure on it. And it'd be about 2.5 grams to 3 grams of black powder.
A little bit more in.
Bit more.
Okay, to load the gun, very, very simple. What we do is we just pour a charge of powder down each barrel. It's a pre-measured amount. I'm sticking 3.5 drams down this gun. This is actually a 14 gauge. Most guns nowadays are in 12. And then on top of the gun we'll place some wadding. A bit environmentally friendly. I'm using a bit of toilet paper, which I used this morning. So, and you can use anything as wadding. They use a bit of sheep's wool sometimes. The wadding is on down on top of the powder. Just make sure it's seated on top really well. We then have a shot flask. We pour our shot down the barrel, down each barrel again, and then we seat it with a little card rod on top. And obviously in the show ring we won't be using any shot. And then we need to prime the pan. Now this gun is just over 200 years old. The left barrel shoots fine, but the spring on the right barrel is a little bit warm, and I suspect it won't go off, but we'll give it a go anyway. We might get lucky. In the wet, these things were absolutely useless, but they did use them for duck shooting. And you'll often hear a flash of the pan, and that is where the powder goes off, but it doesn't ignite the main charge. Just be lucky now, see if we get any of them to go. There we go. Mr. Manton, one of the greatest gun makers in the world. And here you have it in year 2010, and this was made in about 1790. So, and it's still going.
Gunsmith Manton was the first man to put a hut onto the end of the barrel, so you could take the barrel off the stock. Before then it was all screwed together. Manton was also the first person to put 2 barrels together, side by side or over and under, because over and under isn't a modern thought. They were using over and unders even back in the flintlock days. So Manton did the removable breech, so you could take the barrels off the action, and he also did the ribs on the gun which put the 2 barrels together. He also did the waterproof lock. If you have a look on the stand later and go and have a chat with Chris, Chris will explain about the waterproof lock on there, which is interesting. Then we come to percussion. Now why is percussion better than flintlock, Chris?
Well, ostensibly it's waterproof. This gun Well, this system was invented by a clergyman called Alexander Forsyth, and one of his sports was shooting duck. He lived in Scotland where it rains most of the time, and when it's not raining it's drizzling. And you just couldn't manage to shoot duck with a flintlock that I've just shown you. So he invented a system whereby they used fulminated mercury. There are a number of different systems, but ultimately we settled on the cap system. And this is like a toy cap that people would use when they were boys. And it's just a copper cap that sits on the nipple. And this gun, not only is it fast, but it is waterproof. And for the first time now, you can shoot in the rain. And it loads very much the same as the flintlock. We start with our charge of powder. We bung the load down both barrels. Again, it's pre-weighed. We take our wadding, which we shove down. And we're using Mr. Andrex's finest today. Sitting on top.
Colour is optional, by the way.
Now, again, having done that, all we do is we dump our lead on top. And again, this flask will throw 1 1/4, 1.5 ounce, depending how I set it up. And I just pour it straight down the barrel. And again, stick a card wad on top. The difference between this gun is then in the priming. And we prime this just by taking a copper cap and sticking it on the nipple at the back of the gun. And the beauty of this is once the nipple is on, the cartridge is on the nipple, then you can lower the hammers down, and this gun is now waterproof. And you can carry it around all day without having to worry about the rain getting into it. It's also efficient compared to the flintlock, which used to fail quite regular. But this one will go off first time without any problem. And it will go out pretty much every time. Ian, give me a go.
Now, once they got the percussion, it was a lot better. The Navy used flintlocks on the cannons to fire the cannons off. And the Navy actually hated the percussion system because the little copper caps that went on top of the nipple, because in the Navy they didn't wear boots on the ships, and the little copper caps would get into their feet, and the Navy actually hated them. Then, although they had flintlocks that were breech loaders, and they had cannons that were breech loaders, they had like a pot that was like a cup that they put in the back of the barrel and then wedge it in and fire it. What we needed was a way of having the charge in one cartridge, like we've got today. And what they did, the first system they had was first invented in 1834. So they were still using percussion, but they put a little pin in the top. And the pin came down, and this is obviously called a pin fire. You could use it as a breech loader, and the cartridge would go in the back. You still had the same hammers as you had on the percussion, but the head of it was slightly a different shape, and it came down on top of the pin. Can we fire the pin fire? It was now a breech loader, so you could now load it. It was a lot quicker. You didn't need to use your muzzle loading to do it. Same again, pull back the hammers. Lot quicker. Now we're getting into the modern day now.